Nearly 12 years have passed, yet the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 remains unresolved. A large passenger aircraft carrying 239 people vanished completely, with no distress signal, no wreckage, and only questions that still have no answers. Now, a new search is about to begin in a remote part of the Indian Ocean. This is not a theory spreading online. It is a real operation, using advanced deep-sea robots and a strategy very different from previous attempts. Instead of scanning the seabed blindly, scientists have narrowed the search to 3 key hotspots identified through years of data analysis, from the mysterious Whisper area to Blaya Masha and the dangerous deep waters in the south. The vessel Armada is carrying out a quiet race against time and harsh ocean conditions. When modern technology has already located ships lost for more than a century, it is reasonable to believe that MH370 may one day be found as well. Nearly 12 years after it vanished, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 remains one of the most disturbing aviation mysteries of the modern era. Not because nothing was done, but because so much was done and still no final answer was reached. In March 2014, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 passengers and crew disappeared during what should have been a routine overnight flight, leaving behind no distress call, no confirmed crash site, and no clear explanation that could fully account for how a modern aircraft simply ceased to exist in real time. The days that followed were filled with urgency, global coordination, and constant headlines as governments deployed aircraft, ships, and satellites across vast regions of ocean in an effort to locate any sign of the missing plane. When early assumptions about the flight path collapsed, the search shifted dramatically, moving thousands of miles west into the Indian Ocean, where the scale of the challenge quickly became clear. What unfolded over the next several years was one of the largest and most expensive search operations in aviation history, covering an immense area of open ocean that stretched far beyond what most people could easily imagine. Despite the effort, the outcome remained painfully limited, because while pieces of debris later confirmed the aircraft had been lost at sea, none of them could point to the precise place where MH370 came to rest. As time passed, the story slowly faded from daily news coverage, yet it never truly disappeared from public consciousness, especially for the families who were left with uncertainty instead of closure. MH370 became a symbol of something deeply unsettling, the idea that even in a world of satellites, radar, and constant digital tracking, there were still gaps large enough for an entire aircraft to fall through. For a long time, it seemed as though those gaps could not be closed, not because people stopped caring, but because the available data did not allow investigators to narrow the search with confidence. Satellite signals provided clues, but not precision, while radar information revealed changes in direction without explaining motive or final outcome. Each piece of information added context, yet none of it was strong enough on its own to bring the search to a definitive conclusion. As the years went by, MH370 shifted from an active investigation to what many quietly accepted as an unsolved case, one that might never move forward again. That perception began to change only when researchers started looking backward with new tools rather than forward with the same assumptions. Instead of treating the disappearance as a single moment lost in time, analysts began examining it as a sequence of signals and interactions that could be revisited with more advanced methods. Old satellite data, radio behavior, and flight modeling were reanalyzed using techniques that simply did not exist when the plane first vanished. This new approach did not promise certainty, but it offered something that had been missing for years: a way to reduce uncertainty rather than accept it. The renewed search is rooted in the idea that earlier efforts were limited not by lack of commitment, but by the technology and analytical frameworks available at the time. Covering enormous areas of ocean once felt like the only responsible choice, yet experience showed that size alone does not translate into clarity. The ocean is too vast, and treating every square kilometer as equally likely can turn even the most determined search into an exercise in exhaustion. What changed this time was the decision to stop thinking in terms of scale and start thinking in terms of probability. By combining years of independent research, refined data models, and cross-checked assumptions, investigators were able to identify patterns that kept pointing back to the same regions. These patterns suggested that MH370 was not lost everywhere, but likely confined to a much smaller set of locations that deserved closer attention. This realization did not erase the failures of the past, but it gave them meaning, because each unsuccessful sweep helped narrow the margins of error. At the same time, advances in deep-sea exploration made it possible to act on these refined conclusions in a way that was not realistic a decade ago. Modern autonomous underwater vehicles can now operate for extended periods, dive to extreme depths, and map the seabed with a level of detail that was once out of reach. The decision to search again reflects confidence that these tools are finally capable of matching the complexity of the environment where MH370 is believed to lie. For the families who have lived with unanswered questions for nearly 12 years, this moment represents something different from hope or despair because it is grounded in preparation rather than speculation. The renewed effort does not pretend to rewrite history, but it does signal a shift in how that history is being approached. With clearer priorities, stronger technology, and a more focused strategy, the search moves forward into its next phase, one that no longer asks the ocean to give up everything, but instead asks it to reveal what has been most carefully hidden. The biggest lesson learned from the first decade of searching for MH370 is that covering a massive area does not automatically bring investigators closer to the truth, especially when the data guiding that search is uncertain. Between 2014 and 2017, search teams scanned more than 200,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, an area so large that even modern mapping tools struggled to provide consistent coverage at meaningful resolution. At the time, this approach seemed reasonable because investigators were working with limited information and believed the safest option was to search as widely as possible. However, as the years passed without a confirmed discovery, it became clear that size alone was not the solution, and in some cases, it may have worked against the goal of finding the aircraft. The Indian Ocean is not a uniform surface where every location carries the same probability, and treating it that way spreads resources thin while lowering the chance of detecting small but critical clues. Early searches relied heavily on broad satellite arcs and general flight models, which were useful for defining direction but not precise enough to pinpoint a final resting place. This meant that enormous regions were searched based on possibility rather than likelihood, forcing teams to divide their attention across vast distances. As a result, even advanced sonar systems were often used at wide spacing, which reduced image detail and increased the chance that debris could be missed. Over time, researchers began to recognize that a different mindset was needed, one that valued probability over coverage and precision over scale. Instead of asking where MH370 could possibly be, analysts started asking where it was most likely to be, based on patterns that repeated across independent studies. This shift did not discard earlier data, but it reorganized it, allowing old information to be viewed through a more focused lens. Satellite communication records were revisited, not as rough guides, but as structured signals that could be compared and tested against newer models. Drift analysis of recovered debris was refined using updated ocean current data, narrowing the range of potential origin points. Flight behavior assumptions were also reconsidered, with attention given to consistency rather than speculation. Each of these steps helped reduce uncertainty, not by eliminating unknowns, but by ranking them. As the probability map became clearer, certain areas stood out repeatedly, while others lost relevance. This made it possible to move away from the idea that the entire southern Indian Ocean needed equal attention. The new strategy accepts that searching less can sometimes reveal more, especially when that smaller area is chosen carefully. By concentrating effort where multiple data sources overlap, investigators can deploy technology in a way that maximizes both time and resolution. This also allows underwater vehicles to operate closer together, producing more detailed images of the seabed rather than broad outlines. Another important factor is endurance, because modern autonomous systems can now remain underwater for days, but only if their missions are carefully planned. Focusing on defined zones ensures that these systems are used efficiently rather than being pushed to cover excessive distances. This approach reflects a more mature understanding of the problem, shaped by experience rather than optimism. It acknowledges that earlier searches were not wrong, but incomplete, constrained by the tools and assumptions available at the time. By building on what has already been learned, the current effort avoids starting from zero and instead moves forward with sharper intent. The decision to stop searching everywhere is not a retreat, but a refinement, one that treats the ocean as a complex environment rather than an empty space. With this shift in strategy, the search transitions naturally toward identifying specific locations that demand closer examination, setting the stage for a focused investigation rather than another sweeping expedition. The current search for MH370 is built around 3 specific locations that continue to appear across independent analyses, and these areas now form the backbone of the entire mission. 2 of the hotspots lie in the southern part of the search zone, known as Blaya Masha and the IG area, both of which emerged from long-term reviews of satellite data, flight behavior, and debris drift modeling. These southern regions were not selected because they were unexplored, but because repeated studies suggested they deserved closer inspection with better tools and tighter search patterns. Earlier missions passed through parts of these areas, yet the technology and resolution available at the time limited how thoroughly the seabed could be examined. What makes the current effort different is the intent to revisit these zones with a sharper focus, using higher resolution mapping and longer underwater mission times. The third hotspot sits farther north and stands apart from the others, not only because of its location, but because of how it was identified. This area is known as the Whisper Area, and it is based on a method that looks beyond traditional radar and satellite tracking. The concept was developed by aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey, who proposed that MH370 may have left subtle traces as it passed through global radio wave networks. When an aircraft flies through long-range radio signals used by amateur radio operators, it can disturb those signals in small but measurable ways. These disturbances are not recorded as flight data, but as changes in signal behavior that can be logged and preserved. What makes this approach possible today is the existence of massive international databases that have stored these radio interactions for many years. By comparing the timing and characteristics of these disturbances with known aircraft movements, analysts can identify patterns that align with a possible flight path. In the case of MH370, this method produced a location that sits north of the previously emphasized southern zones, creating a new area of interest rather than replacing older ones. The Whisper Area does not contradict earlier findings, but instead adds another layer to the overall picture, expanding the search in a controlled and data-driven way. Skepticism around this method is expected, especially because it relies on indirect signals rather than direct tracking. However, the strength of the approach lies in how well it aligns with other independent models when viewed collectively. Rather than standing alone, the Whisper area overlaps with broader probability trends that have emerged from years of research. This convergence is what gives the hotspot its significance, not any single data point taken in isolation. Together, Blea Masha, the IG area, and the Whisper area represent a shift away from guesswork and toward convergence. Each zone reflects a different method of analysis, yet all point toward a narrower region of the Indian Ocean than ever before. This is why the search does not treat these areas equally, but prioritizes them based on logistical flow and environmental conditions. The southern hotspots are being examined first, partly because of their proximity to existing data and partly because weather patterns allow for more stable operations at certain times. The northern Whisper area is scheduled for later investigation, once conditions and mission planning allow for a smooth transition. This sequence is not arbitrary, but designed to maximize efficiency and reduce risk to equipment. What unites all three hotspots is the fact that they are grounded in repetition rather than speculation. They appear again and again across different models, created by researchers working independently of one another. That consistency is what separates the current search from earlier efforts that relied on broader assumptions. Instead of asking the ocean to reveal everything at once, the mission now listens to where the data has been pointing all along. As the search moves forward, these three hotspots serve as anchors, guiding where technology is deployed and how time is spent beneath the surface. With the locations defined and the priorities set, attention naturally turns to the vessel tasked with turning analysis into action and carrying this strategy into the depths of the Indian Ocean. At the center of the current MH370 search is the vessel responsible for turning years of analysis into physical action, the survey ship Armada 8605, operated by Ocean Infinity. This ship is not simply a support platform, but a mobile command center designed specifically for deep-sea search missions in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Armada 8605 began its work in the southern part of the search zone, where Blea Masha and the IG area are located, following a carefully planned route rather than an open-ended sweep. This decision reflects a key principle of the new search strategy, which is to move deliberately instead of rushing across wide distances. Each survey mission is planned in advance, taking into account seabed depth, terrain complexity, and the endurance limits of the underwater vehicles being deployed. From the outside, progress can appear slow, especially when the ship pauses or alters its movement, but these changes are a normal part of deep ocean operations. Weather plays a major role in every decision made at sea, particularly in the southern Indian Ocean, where conditions can shift rapidly and without warning. High waves, strong swell, and changing wind patterns can make it unsafe to launch or recover underwater vehicles, even if those vehicles are capable of operating far below the surface. When operations pause, it is not because the search has failed or because something is being hidden, but because safety and equipment protection come first. Launching autonomous vehicles requires precise timing and stable conditions on deck, especially when they are lowered into thousands of meters of open water. Once deployed, these vehicles can operate independently for long periods, mapping the seabed while the ship maintains a careful position above. Recovery is just as critical as deployment, since bringing the vehicles back on board in rough seas risks damage that could end the mission entirely. This is why pauses and course adjustments are built into the search plan rather than treated as setbacks. The mission is designed to last weeks, not days, and every decision is made with that long timeline in mind. As the southern zones are examined, Armada 8605 will gradually shift north toward the Whisper area, following the same disciplined approach. This transition is not rushed because moving between zones involves recalibrating equipment, adjusting mission parameters, and reassessing environmental conditions. Each phase of the search builds on the last, allowing data from one area to inform how the next area is approached. Unlike earlier efforts, which often faced pressure to move quickly or cover more ground, this operation prioritizes consistency and data quality. The ship's crew works around the clock, monitoring vehicle performance, reviewing sonar images, and ensuring that every pass over the seabed is properly recorded. What makes this approach effective is not speed, but repetition, because multiple overlapping scans increase the chance of detecting subtle objects. Small pieces of debris, especially those partially buried or resting in uneven terrain, can be missed if scanned only once at wide spacing. By maintaining tight survey lines, Armada 8605 improves the odds that anything unusual will stand out during later analysis. Another important factor is communication, because the ship maintains constant contact with its underwater vehicles whenever conditions allow. This link makes it possible to adjust missions in real time, refining search paths based on what is seen below. All of this underscores a reality that is often overlooked in public discussions of the search, which is that deep ocean exploration is slow by necessity, not by choice. Every meter scanned represents hours of planning, execution, and review, even when nothing obvious appears on the sonar. The absence of immediate discoveries does not mean failure, but rather confirms that the process is unfolding as designed. As Armada 8605 continues its methodical journey across the search zones, it carries not only advanced technology, but also the weight of expectation built over nearly 12 years. With the ship actively transforming theory into action, attention now turns to the tools beneath the surface that make this careful progress possible, and why they represent the most important upgrade since the first searches began. The biggest difference in this search lies beneath the surface. Ocean Infinity is using 3 autonomous underwater vehicles known as Hugin 6000. These machines are not experimental tools. They are proven systems designed for extreme deep sea work. Each Hugin 6000 can dive to depths where sunlight never reaches. They can operate thousands of meters below the surface without human control. Once deployed, they can remain underwater for up to 72 hours. This allows them to scan large areas without interruption. In earlier searches, vehicles had to return more often. That limited coverage and reduced efficiency. The Hugin 6000 changes that balance. It can travel long distances while maintaining stable altitude above the seabed. That stability matters when searching for small objects. Even slight movement can blur sonar images. These vehicles carry high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar. This sonar creates detailed images of the ocean floor. It can reveal shapes that older systems might overlook. Large debris stands out more clearly. Smaller fragments become easier to identify. The vehicles also carry magnetometers. These sensors can detect metal hidden beneath sediment. That matters because debris does not always sit in open view. Over time, parts can become partially buried. Traditional sonar may miss them. Magnetometers add another layer of detection. This combination did not exist in the same form in 2015. Back then, coverage was wider, but detail was lower. Today, coverage and precision work together. Another key advantage is endurance. Long missions reduce gaps between scan lines. Fewer gaps mean fewer blind spots. That increases confidence in what has been searched. The Hugin 6000 is built by Kongsberg Maritime. It is used worldwide for oil, science, and recovery missions. Its reliability is well established. This is why experts see the current search differently. The ocean has not changed. The tools have. And with better tools, the search enters a more decisive phase. For a long time, the deep ocean was treated as a final boundary, a place where anything lost would likely remain hidden forever, not because it vanished completely, but because humans lacked the tools to look properly. History shows that this assumption was wrong, and the turning point was never the ocean itself, but the technology used to explore it. Many wrecks that were once labeled impossible to recover were eventually found once deep-sea robotics became precise, reliable, and patient enough to do the job. One of the most important aviation precedents is the crash of Air France Flight 447, which disappeared over the Atlantic Ocean in 2009 with 228 people on board. The aircraft went down in extremely deep water, and early search attempts failed repeatedly despite intense international effort. For nearly 2 years, investigators had only fragments of information and no clear idea where the main wreckage lay. The breakthrough came only after advanced autonomous underwater vehicles were deployed with higher resolution sonar and better mapping accuracy. When the debris field was finally located, investigators were able to recover both black boxes, proving that even after years underwater, critical evidence could still survive. That discovery reshaped expectations for what deep-sea searches could realistically achieve. Beyond aviation, naval history offers even stronger examples of long-lost objects being found at depths comparable to, or greater than, the suspected resting place of MH370. The nuclear submarine USS Scorpion was lost in 1968 at a depth of more than 3,000 meters, and for months its fate remained uncertain. It was eventually located using deep-sea cameras and towed sonar systems, despite the technical limits of the era. Similarly, USS Thresher, which sank during a test dive in 1963, was found at extreme depth through systematic underwater surveys that pushed technology to its limits at the time. Cold War history provides another example in the Soviet submarine K-129, which was lost in the Pacific Ocean and later located at nearly 5,000 meters below the surface. Even decades later, its position could be identified because metallic wreckage leaves a detectable signature when the right sensors are used. Australia has its own example in HMAS AE-1, which disappeared during World War I and remained missing for more than a century. The submarine was finally found in 2017, resting deep underwater after modern sonar mapping narrowed the search area to a manageable zone. Perhaps the most striking demonstration of modern capability is the discovery of the ship Endurance, commanded by Ernest Shackleton and lost in Antarctic ice in 1915. For over 100 years, its location was unknown, and many believed it had been destroyed beyond recognition. In 2022, it was found almost perfectly preserved, thanks to detailed seabed mapping, autonomous vehicles, and precise navigation. The ship was not revealed by luck, but by careful planning, guided by historical records and advanced technology. These discoveries share a common pattern that matters deeply for MH370. None of them were found quickly. None were located by searching everywhere at once. They were discovered only after search areas were narrowed, assumptions were tested, and technology matured enough to act on refined data. The lesson is clear and difficult, but important. Objects lost at sea are not erased by time, they are simply waiting for the right moment to be found. In that context, the renewed search for MH370 does not stand apart from history, but fits squarely within it, as another case where patience, precision, and modern tools may finally succeed where earlier efforts could not. The search for MH370 has always faced the harsh challenges of the deep ocean, but the determination to find this historic aircraft has never disappeared. This time, the most advanced technology is being brought into the mission, with autonomous underwater robots capable of operating thousands of meters below the surface, focused on 3 key areas: Playa Masha and the IG area in the south, and the Whisper area in the north. Not only investigators, but the entire world is now waiting for the moment when the first data is finally sent back.